The government has said it will fight a High Court ruling that could frustrate its timetable for Brexit, claiming that voters want them to get on with it. 3 judges ruled that Parliament, not the government alone, can trigger the formal process of leaving the EU. Brexit Secretary David Davis said 17.4 million Leave voters had given the government the biggest mandate in history to leave the EU. The Supreme Court is expected to hear the government's appeal next month. In the landmark ruling, the High Court judges said the government could not trigger the Article 50 process of formally leaving the European Union alone, they must have the approval of Parliament. BBC political editor Laura Kuenssberg described the ruling as a massive obstacle for Prime Minister Theresa May, who says she wants to trigger Article 50 by the end of March. If the government loses in the Supreme Court, it will have to publish some form of new law for MPs, and the House of Lords, to vote on. MPs could then push to set the terms for negotiating withdrawal. The Prime Minister's spokeswoman said she would be calling President of the EU Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, to say she intended to stick to her March 2017 deadline for triggering Article 50. Amid suggestions of a possible early general election, the spokeswoman added that Mrs. May believed there shouldn't be an election until 2020 and that remains her view. Mr. Davis told the BBC the result of the EU referendum must be respected. Parliament voted by 6-1 to give the decision to the people, no ifs or buts, and that's why we are appealing this to get on with delivering the best deal for Britain. That's the best deal for growth, the best deal for investment, the best deal for jobs. The people want us to get on with it and that's what we intend to do. But Gina Miller, the lead claimant in bringing the case to the High Court, urged the government to do the responsible sober thing, which is to do the job we pay them for, to debate all the aspects to do with leaving and then have a vote. Legal hammer blow. She rejected criticism that the case was subverting democracy and said it was not about politics, this was about process. One of the big arguments in the referendum was parliamentary sovereignty, so you can't on the day you get back sovereignty decide you're going to sidestep or throw it away. BBC Legal Affairs correspondent Clive Coleman described the ruling as a legal hammer blow by the judges, in an important constitutional case that defined the limits of government power. The government had argued it could use ancient prerogative powers to give effect to the will of the people. But the 3 judges looking at the case found there was no constitutional convention of the royal prerogative, powers used by ministers, being used in legislation relating to the EU. They added that triggering Article 50 would fundamentally change UK people's rights, and that the government cannot change or do away with rights under UK law unless Parliament gives it authority to do so. Calling the case a pure question of law, Lord Chief Justice, Lord Thomas said, "The court is not concerned with and does not express any view about the merits of leaving the European Union, that is a political issue." But UKIP leader Nigel Farage said he feared a betrayal of the 51.9% of voters who had backed leaving the EU in June's referendum. "We are heading for a half Brexit," he said. "I worry that a betrayal may be near at hand. I now fear that every attempt will be made to block or delay the triggering of Article 50. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn said, "This ruling underlines the need for the government to bring its negotiating terms to Parliament without delay." Labour respects the decision of the British people to leave the European Union. But there must be transparency and accountability to Parliament on the terms of Brexit. Liberal Democrat leader Tim Farron told the BBC, what the government was seeking to do was to impose a deal that absolutely nobody voted for, that most people who voted to leave wouldn't be happy with and most people who voted to remain wouldn't be happy with, without any kind of parliamentary scrutiny. So it's a terrible shame it had to go to the courts, but what has happened is that democracy and sovereignty have been restored. The UK voted by 52% to 48% to leave the European Union in a referendum on June 23. The EU's other 27 member states have said negotiations about the terms of the UK's exit, due to last 2 years, cannot begin until Article 50 has been invoked.